Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. A long drought of 3 weeks has finally come to an end. My master's thesis has been handed in, so it's time to talk about bike racing again. What have the cyclocross riders been up to? With me here to discuss that is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We are going to cover pretty much a couple of big names. Today is really going to be a recap episode. We're going to cover the Nove Mesto Mountain Bike World Cup because the Mountain Bike World Cup heads to Leongang this weekend. And we're of course going to cover Wout van Aert, maybe a bit of Tom Pidcock in the Giro as well. So let's dive into that Nove Mesto weekend. It has been behind us for a week now. We're right between Nove Mesto and Leongang, as said. The big story, of course, that was, at least for us on our minds there, was Mathieu van der Poel making a return to mountain biking. We covered that briefly in one of our older podcasts where we both said we're going to see what Van der Poel is up to. What is his mentality? We both expected him to take it more serious than he did. We had the indication that he would race in Germany a week before, but in the end, the real thing here is what we both concluded was that he kind of took it for granted. He went to Nove Mesto after 2 training rides, didn't do that German race. He did the recon, so that makes 3 rides on the mountain bike before that race. And in the race, it's something that we've seen quite a lot with Van der Poel on the mountain bike in recent events. He's not comfortable. He made an early mistake, was overly aggressive, ran into Spanish champion Valero, former Olympic medalist, who later lashed out at him because he said Van der Poel didn't respect the mountain bike riders. That was a first crash. A bit later we got another replay on one of the simplest rollers at the end of the course, at the end of the start loop in that case it was. He crashed again, and that was very reminiscent of what we saw in Glasgow. Very easy course, lots of anticipation. He needed a result, or well, not really, but he came in there thinking he needed a result to qualify for the Olympics. Let's put it that way. Silly crash there, easiest corner of the course. Here, easiest feature of the course as well. And he makes another silly mistake. And we didn't go to this extent, right? But we both said that he needed to take mountain bike seriously, put in the hours, put in the work, start building now towards those Olympics if that's his goal. And he didn't do it, and this is of course the worst case scenario of what could have happened, a minor fracture in his wrist at the end of the day.
It was definitely not the outcome that he had hoped for, but definitely the outcome that I would say he almost deserved if you look at the way he prepared for it, because as you said, he took it for granted. He thought that he was going to be able to show up and be competitive, and I think that he's really misjudging that whole approach by thinking that would be the way to go for such a race. And it was of course already a surprise that he, not really a surprise, but not doing that small race in Germany. You can look at that and be like, that's not a great indication. Maybe there was a reason for that, but they decided to not do it. And that's already less hours, I would say, that you are not on the bike, not having the feeling, not really knowing where to push. And I think that he has this ability to really try to find the limit, but when you're just not really capable at this point, I think that he has the experience, and if he was going to be able to put more time and effort into it and be more prepared, I guess he would be able to do much better than what he's doing right now. And it's almost like he's putting himself in danger, because I think he crashed at a point where the first crash is maybe something that you could say in the kerfuffle and everything. It was very busy. He was very optimistic going there around the outside. I can understand the frustrations for Valero, but it's, it happens at times. It's not really, we've seen it multiple times in mountain bike, mainly when it's just very small. And yeah, the riders are trying to move up, are very optimistic, and things happen. I think that is not really it's not ideal, but it happens. And I think mainly the second crash is just super unnecessary, could have been avoided, was very silly, and well be seen as an outcome of the way he prepared for Nove Mesto World Cup.
I don't want to completely reiterate what we said in the preview we did for Nove Mesto, right? But to summarize, since Van der Poel left mountain bike really around 2020, he did those Olympics and had his brief returns. It's become a different sport with a lot more riders at the front of the races. It's very competitive. I wouldn't necessarily make the statement, because I don't really have anything to back that up, that the level has increased, but for sure there's more riders at the front, making the fighting for position a lot more intense and positioning a lot more important. Van der Poel hasn't prepared well, and you can say that these crashes are a result of that and that this is a wake-up call, but shouldn't they have already drawn that conclusion from Glasgow, Issam? Because if you look at his last 4 mountain bike races, Tokyo ended with that crash. You can put that on a mental thing. He didn't really listen to the people in the Dutch team informing him that they would remove that wooden plank on the rock drop. Fine. But Glasgow, that was pretty much a similar situation, right? They took the return to mountain bike for granted. He did it because he had to. We had written it early in the season that he needed points or a result at the World Championships to qualify for the Paris Olympics, which was still his goal at the time. They didn't do any of that. Then they only realized that shortly before the World Championship, so they made the decision to race there. They then realized he would need to start P100, so they eventually bodged the UCI into creating a exception so they could start further up, which was highly controversial. And then that ended with a super silly crash because he hadn't done much mountain bike prep, because despite his ambitions to be good at the Olympics, his actual goals and short-term success was on the road, understandably so. But you see the parallels, right, between Glasgow and here. They come from a luxurious position, they think that they can do fine, they can get a result. It's not really super pressure. They're just like, we'll do our best, we'll get a result, we'll see whatever. But both times it ends with a silly crash because he clearly isn't comfortable on the bike. I think that's ultimately the main thing. It's not that Van der Poel is per definition a bad mountain bike rider. He just hasn't put enough hours in, especially at high speed.
I think that the ability is there, but it's very hard to unlock if you don't give yourself time. And I think that is currently the issue that he has mainly, is that he doesn't give himself time to get this, sort of feeling with the mountain bike and, actually be able to push with knowledge, I guess. Because now it almost feels like he is like pushing, but it's all sort of a guess. And he is just trying to get through the course the best way he can with the information that he has at that point, but it's just not enough. And it's a shame, because I think that ability, I guess, is for me at least, I think that he is able to, if he puts in the work, to be absolutely one of the better riders in mountain bike. I'm not saying that he is going to dominate, but I think he has the ability to race up front. And he's taking that away, I guess, by this whole approach of, let me just do the reckon, have a feeling on the bike for an hour or two, and let's race. I mean, that's not gonna work. That's just it's foolish, and it's never gonna work. I really hope that he and the team, I guess, learned from it. As you said, that already happened in Glasgow, and there already they should have learned their lesson, I guess. But they clearly didn't, and they have not been bitten once, but it's already twice or 3 times if you take Tokyo in it as well. So they have to look at this, because they, to be honest, if you look at the reaction outside of this, they've almost made a fool out of themselves with this whole mountain bike campaign and the way they've approached it. And you're putting your name on the line, I think, as a champion, as someone that really wants to win and perform well. I think that you have to be more prepared, and we will see if that will be something they will implement in the next part of his campaign this year in mountain bike, and if that even is going to take place. I think it will, but you never know. But hopefully they have learned somewhat their lesson, and they will implement it to an extent in which he is going to be able to give himself time, because I think if he does, it's always going to be better than what he's doing right now.
What do you think of his claims, or at least the ambition that he's expressed to target mountain biking at the 2028 Olympics, because that's at the end of the day why he was here, as a start of a trajectory towards that. After this, and maybe it's the hindsight, a lot of people say, well, he should just drop that and focus on road, but what's your thoughts about that?
The way he's looking right now and the way it's heading, it's definitely not heading in his favor. It's not going well, but I think that if he would prepare well and he sees that the performances will come and the results will come and it will get better, I think at that point everybody will then all, change their mind and say, oh, I think that it is all going to be well. I think that the main reason he's doing this is because he thinks, and many do think with him, that the road course at the Olympics is going to be just a bit too tough. You could maybe ask the question, and if he has that ambition, it could maybe work in his favor. Does he want to win a Liège-Bastogne-Liège in the future? And if that is the case, is he going to change as a rider maybe to be better at the climbs? If that is the case, that could maybe benefit him on the road in the race in LA. But and then he could maybe eye a good result there. But I feel that for now, if you look at the chances, mountain bike is always going to be higher. And currently, it's not really only, the strength of the others. It's really himself and the way he has been sabotaging himself going into these races. If he doesn't do that, I think that he would do already way better and everybody would be a lot more optimistic about his chances in at the Olympics. But if he keeps doing like the way he's going right now, I don't think he has that much of a chance at the Olympics, and it will be another Tokyo, I guess.
So I can understand his reasoning to target mountain biking at the Olympics, because it's simply a matter of courses. You don't know what road course you're going to get, but the variation in mountain bike courses is significantly smaller. So in the sense of wanting to have a good, realistic opportunity at a medal or a solid, secure opportunity, I can understand it. And you could always target mountain bike and road racing. So I understand that. But in my opinion, Issam, it makes no sense that the approach they're taking. We've covered it just now that the crash was a result of it, but you can't take it for granted, the mountain bike discipline. It's a high-end discipline. He has been off the mountain bike for a long time. What do you think is going to happen if we chug Evie Richards onto a cyclocross bike with 2 training rides in muddy Namur and make her take the downhills? Like, I think Evie Richards can do fine on the cross bike, but she's been off it for a few years. It will take time for her to reach the potential, which I think is a top 5 in Namur. But it's obviously asking for disaster if you're going to take somebody who hasn't ridden the cyclocross bike. The cyclocross bike leans relatively close to the road bike. That's not a huge switch to make, especially not if you do it every year. And if you're Van der Poel, you've been doing that cyclocross racing since you're 8 years old. You have a certain feel that doesn't go away because you don't do it for a summer. But look at Joris Nieuwenhuis. Joris Nieuwenhuis, when he returned with Baloise, he needed a full season to get his technical abilities at a consistent level while racing at racing speed. He said, I can perform well technically, but then the fatigue kicks in and I need to do it at high speed. That's where I make the mistakes. And you see, that's with Van der Poel as well. Probably in the recon he had no problem with everything, but when the heart rate is up, when he's pushing it, he makes mistakes because he's just not comfortable on the bike. The mountain bike is completely different from the cyclocross bike. Different type of steer, different type of handling, lot wider tires, different type of skill sets needed. That's just tricky. So to complete the circle, if you put Richards on that cyclocross bike, she can top 5 in Namur if she prepares for it. If she doesn't prepare, there's a big chance, if Namur is muddy, she makes a really nasty crash in the downhill. Not because she's an incapable bike handler, she's a very good bike handler. But rather because she's on a bike in conditions with a heart rate in stressful race conditions that she hasn't been exposed to in a long time. So I think that it makes no sense to me, if you're saying this is the start of my trajectory to LA 2028, to say, oh, we're going to do a complete blank race here. We're going to go in with no training so we know what the level is. That doesn't make sense to me, because especially with how this works, like the amount of hours you put in to get a feeling on the bike, and you can't really use it for anything valuable. It would have been useful if you had done like a short prep for this. Sure, you can say the form is not at its best, perfectly fine, but at least get a sense of where you are technically and how much time you would need to invest in that for the Olympics.
There has to be a change, and the change has to come right away. I think the first time he will be back on the mountain bike, he needs to go with a different approach, a more serious approach, an approach which, as I said before, will give him the time and will give him the ability to compete. It's almost like this, like someone is trying to do an exams, has 7 weeks to prepare for, and then start studying the night before, and and doesn't even take that night before seriously, and rolls into class, does the exam, and so on, hope and pray. I mean, that's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. It's, you most likely are going to fail, and it's the same thing right now. It's just he has to give himself time, and the same goes for the next couple of years going to 2028. I think that he has to be more serious, add more races. Maybe even try to do some smaller races before you actually go into a World Cup, because as of now, it's clear that he needs those kilometers on the mountain bike. He needs, and especially on sort of I would say, sort of on a level where you're somewhat pushing and not just playing around a little bit and going through the corners and having some nice slow-mos. It's more than that. You need to be there when it matters the most, and that's during the races. And that's on a, as you say, higher effort, and your body is just reacting way differently, and you're just so much more on the edge. And he needs to drop this whole thing that he wants to be at the front so as quickly as possible. Obviously, it's an advantage, but I think that you just need to take it a little bit more easier, because sometimes, the races will give you the opportunity to come to the front. You need to be a bit more patient. You see a lot of riders that start quite well and then later in the race drop. For him, it's just basically bank in those races, don't take any unnecessary risks, and try to get through the field and just get better, learn, and be very very eager to get to that. And I think, the thing with this is, I'm talking as if I'm talking to someone that doesn't have a mentality of, that is being eager and wants to work. He's, I think, maybe one of the riders that really puts in incredible amount of work, really wants to achieve the best, is, works very hard and tries to be a better version of himself every season, and every time we are amazed by his performances. But it lacks at the mountain bike discipline, and it's just very weird. Maybe he approaches this a bit similar to what he does with cyclocross, which goes well for him, because we have heard those stories as well in cyclocross that he touches his cyclocross bike twice before he goes and does his first race, and then beats everyone by a minute and a half. So he has that maybe, and that is probably something that he has to let go and realize that it's just a little bit different than cyclocross, that mountain bike just deserves a bit more attention.
Yeah, I agree with you there, because he does have a mentality, and like I said before, cyclocross, he's done it for a long time, he has a feeling with it, whereas mountain bike, he picked that up later, and he doesn't have that feeling. He's been out for a long time as well, so that means that you need to make choices. And to put that in practical terms, if your goal is to be good at the Olympics in LA 2028, then you also need to race mountain bike races. You need to work on your ranking. At some point, you will need to score points for your country so you can be secure of a spot at those Olympics. Because remember back to the Paris Olympics, which we just discussed, he didn't have points, or the Netherlands didn't have points. Main problem there is the Netherlands. His country doesn't score that many points. So he needs to score enough points, so he secured of a top 18 spot, which will yield you a starting spot, which he will probably get for the Netherlands at the Olympics, or he needs to get a result at the World Championships. But the risk with that last approach is that if he flats in that race and he misses that quota, then he has nothing. So he needs to start taking that serious. The Mountain Bike World Championships are a quote-unquote goal for this summer. I think that I'm a bit worried for that, because he's at most going to do one mountain bike race before that. But he should do that. Then he should race the World Championships. Then after that, he should do the 2 overseas World Cups. He should go to Lake Placid. He should go to Mont Saint-Anne, do the Canadian and American mountain bike World Cups. And next season he should also invest in the mountain bike races, and probably in this cycle at some point he should also skip the Tour to do the summer mountain bike races, because he's skipping Leongang now. He's skipping, I think, Andorra, or I'm not entirely sure where we're heading after that, but he needs to prioritize that, get his points, move up the ranks, because at that point he also won't necessarily be depending that much on the early moves up. It's Val di Sol, by the way, not Andorra. It's Andorra that he also can't race because that's in the Tour. Skipping the Tour 1 year would just allow him to do a lot more races, and that will be necessary for him to have a good starting position at the Olympics. It will allow him to qualify for the Olympics. It will allow him to get a better feeling on the bike, and it's just a necessity if he really wants to compete for a gold medal there. Because even if he shows up in his best form with all of that, it won't be easy. The top is super packed. He will also be facing a guy named Tom Pidcock, who will be looking for a third straight gold medal. Pidcock is a formidable opponent for him. It won't be easy. But a final question here, Issam, regarding Van der Poel, is the general response to the injury. It might be a Dutch thing. I haven't read much international media on the Van der Poel thing, but in the Netherlands there are now quite a lot of calls from pundits who say, well, Van der Poel, he should just drop mountain biking, or the team will demand him to drop mountain biking because he got injured now and put his Tour in jeopardy if his fracture was worse. It'll be fine for the Tour, by the way, is what the last reports indicate. But if Alpecin would actually tell him no more mountain biking, I think that's a very reactionary response from Alpecin, almost admitting to their own failure, because surely you make these assessments in advance, right? You know that mountain bike is a sport where you can crash, and if you crash on rock garden or somewhere nasty, you can fracture things. I actually don't really agree that mountain biking is a super crash or injury prone sport. I feel a lot more of the top riders in road racing are out after nasty crashes with collarbone fractures and such than in mountain biking. But regardless, surely you make that assessment in advance, you accept the risk that's involved with letting somebody race mountain biking, and if that risk then actually translates to injury, you can't be that surprised.
Yeah, and I think in the end, a lot of the risks that there are there in mountain bike is you're responsible for it. I think that, with road racing, you're in a peloton, and it only takes one or two riders to make a mistake before maybe 30 or 40 riders are involved. And the worst part about that is most of the time it's not the first two that have the worst of the crash. It's most of the time the guys behind that didn't see it or whatever, were not able to break their fall the best way, that get the worst end of it. And I think that it would be a very weird decision by Alpecin. I would understand the decision if, for example, Van der Poel insists on having the similar approach. Then I think that Alpecin will look at it and maybe, be very hesitant in letting Van der Poel race. But I think that Van der Poel is a bit too big for the team, and if he wants to race, he's going to race. And I don't think that they have that much to say. I think that overall, if you look at that, it would be very reactionary. What did you expect? I think then at that point, the team should be more worried about his preparation than on something else. But I don't think that would be a response that I would value very much. I think that they should just be, as I said, focus on his preparation, something that he actually can control, and then just hope for the best. And unfortunately, that's how life goes. Sometimes it can go quite bad.
And of course, for Alpecin, the team, it's important to have a presence in mountain bike. They value that. They value visibility across multiple disciplines. They have a world champion, Pieterse, who shows that if you have a good feeling on the bike, you don't need that much training or preparation to be perfect. And then I come back to what I said before again. Pieterse has been doing mountain biking since he's young. She has a feeling with that bike. She's never been off it for too long. which makes it easier for her to adapt in a short period of training. I think for Pieterse, I would make the case again that there hasn't been too much of a rest after the road season, just 1 week before she got going on the mountain bike again after such a long spring campaign. Probably not the wisest decision, but to avoid having that discussion again, she did look good this weekend in Nove Mesto. She won the short track, she looked quite strong in the cross country and then flatted, which was a real shame. And I mean, I think to an extent it's unlucky, but there's also ways of riding that you can somewhat prevent punctures, but I couldn't really tell what was the case here. From what I saw, at least, she wasn't racing recklessly. It just seemed unfortunate in this case.
Difficult to avoid such a puncture at times, especially there in Nove Mesto. It can happen. But I think that overall she gave a very good impression, and it was just too much. The puncture and then getting that changed, it just didn't help. And then from there on, just very hard to get back into the race. You basically have been standing there for quite some time, and then you have to get back on your bike and get going again. And I think that breaks your rhythm up so much, and then it's just very tough to get back into it. And obviously you have to spend that energy already racing up the climb with that puncture. Don't think that did her any good either. But as you said, I think that she kind of shows that if you have the feeling, Pidcock is maybe also an example that you could take as someone that doesn't need a lot of time on the mountain bike and could perform quite well and also be quite, so clinical, I guess, in a way. Even if he doesn't have a good day, he's still able to, get the most out of such a day and such a race. And I think with Pieterse it's quite similar. She just has that feeling with the bike. She's one of the best, if not the best, mountain bike not at the moment, I think, but she's definitely up there, and she's definitely one of the best. And that just helps as well, because then you just basically, even if you don't have a good day, you're still up there, and maybe that helps also a bit mentally. I don't know, but the feeling is there, and that is the most important thing. It looks good. She's confident. She doesn't really make any mistakes, and that puncture was very unfortunate to see.
I was impressed by her sprint in the short track on the Saturday, which it was really explosive. She came quite strong towards the line there at the end. It was slightly uphill, but we know from road that she's not the most explosive rider there is, so it's intriguing to see how she raced there. And I thought for a while that Neve actually had that in the pocket, but she bonged really, really hard there at the end. At least I think it was Neve. It's over a week ago. I can't really tell anymore, but it was an intriguing race there, and Pieterse made a good impression on me. She raced the Dutch short track national championships a week before to get a better feeling. Or that was 2 weeks before. Then she raced in Germany, where she took an easy win, and then she raced in Nove Mesto. That's the correct order. So she looked good, and I think we'll see in Leongang a good race for her. I don't think Leongang is necessarily the best course for her, but I do think that she'll be up there. We saw it last year, right? It was Prevot and then Pieterse with Lecomte. But now Prevot has gone, so Pieterse is of course also the world champion, which is an extra reason why she's a target. But I mentioned it before, women's mountain bike has changed at least as much as men's mountain bike, Issam, over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that what you're seeing there is basically similar to what we see on the men's side. I think it's on the men's side, maybe it took a little longer, I would say. Like it just, there were certain riders that were somewhat there already, like a Blevins, but it was just never really, it still needed a bit of time. And I think now it's just, those guys have really been getting to the front and are able to perform so well. And I think on the women's side, it's a bit similar. It's one of the things that you have to take in mind, obviously, with mountain bike is that the Olympic cycle is also quite influential. It's always the start of an Olympic cycle. We come with certain riders that basically are able to really elevate themselves, and then when you go towards the next Olympic event, it's just you see certain riders that maybe were performing a little less get better, and the other way around. But it's obviously, you can see right now that on the women's side, say especially with a lady like Mitterwalner, I think that those were talents that were coming. We saw them; they were getting better and better, and I think that it's just right now it's just they are taking their chances, and they're making full use of the opportunity that gets to them in terms of racing at the front and taking the opportunity, and it's great to see and makes it exciting, I guess, because it's new faces does always do well for the sport. It makes sure that your fan base can get behind a new rider. It's a bit refreshing as well. And it's nice to see that it's both on the men's and the women's side. And I think that the racing itself was also quite good. It's not passive. It's quite active, quite trying to use each other weaknesses in a way to get the better of. So I think it's very positive, and I look forward to the next couple of races, because I definitely on the Olympic distance I was very much entertained.
A rider that I'm not going to try and claim as a cyclocross rider, even though she did do a tad of cyclocross, Mona Mittenwalner, but it was great to see her take the win in the women's race in Nove Mesto. I think it was really nice. She had a very rough season last year. I think the season before that also wasn't that great, but especially last season was quite rough. I know she won the Marathon World Championships, but that wasn't really what we expected from her. In 2023, she had a really strong season start, and she won at least 2 races, and she was up there at the World Championships. And then last season, the Olympic season, the expectations were quite high. Her starts have always been an issue, but last year really wasn't good, which was really unfortunate. But now to see her bounce back, that was good. The 2023 season was the one that was tricky. Her season start in Brazil wasn't that good, but now to see her back up there was nice. And she raced the first ever junior women's cyclocross world championships, which were held in Dubendorf, which is the only cyclocross race she has done. So with that, let's move to the Giro, and then we can wrap up. What do you think? Issam, Wout van Aert, we discussed him after the opening weekend, and you made the wise comment to say, I think he'll improve during this Giro, and it wouldn't surprise me if he wins a stage. Well, he delivered with a fantastic stage win in the Strade Bianche stage in the streets of Siena. And afterwards, he also played a decisive role in the Giro, helping Simon Yates win in a phenomenal raid over the Finestre.
I can definitely say that I somewhat expected it, but I have to say it was very hard to see that happening the way he started the Giro. But I think with something like a Giro, we've seen it in the past so many times that riders come in there and are, I wouldn't say terrible, but just are either lacking confidence or form, or both. And I think that, if you look back and you also hear what Van Aert had to say afterwards, it really was also not only the form, but it was also a confidence thing, not really trusting yourself and your efforts anymore. So he needed a stage win, and I think the way he did it in Siena, being able to win there was incredible. I think, that, I don't know what stage it was, but it was one of the stages that Koi won. I think that lead out, which was, I think, almost a kilometer or something, was incredible as well. Obviously the other lead outs were terrible, but he was absolutely able to excel there. And I think that was a pleasure to watch. And I think that the confidence came back to him. And that was also maybe evident in the penultimate stage, where he was, playing such a crucial role in the tactics that Visma played, and helping Yates to overall stage victory and getting the Maglia Rosa. And I think that those are things that you just kind of need to get that confidence. And for him, it's just basically going to the Tour de France with, as I said, a lot of confidence, a very good feeling, and the form doesn't look bad either. I don't think, a lot of people are now speculating if he is as good as he was before, or whatever they are trying to spin. I don't think that he is as good as he was before right now, but I don't think that he needs to be honest, because I think that for him the Tour de France is also going to be very important. Visma definitely needs him at a very good form there, and it will be interesting to see how he can perform there. I really hope that this Giro doesn't cost him a good performance in the Tour de France, because sometimes riders struggle a little bit doing the Giro and then going to the Tour de France. We will see how that will play out for him, but I think the main thing that was very positive, and to be honest, I was quite happy for him, that he was just able to turn all that negativity around, and it's great to see that the media all of a sudden is all positive about Van Aert. But it's great to see that he was able to turn that around.
Well, that's obviously super funny always in Belgium, right? When you look at that, they were super critical after the first two stages, pretty much the TT, and then the stage after they were quite critical and they were looking for explanations, and there was even a podcast titled by one of their biggest newspapers, and they did some quote-unquote research into why Van Aert is sick so often and why it always ruins him, and they were almost calling him the Fernando Alonso of cycling, the most unlucky rider in the world. And then they turned it around and he became a god and best domestique ever, greatest stage hunter. The narrative turned, more than 180 degrees. They did a 360 and then 4 more 180s and then finally another looping to end where they are now. That's the funny thing in Belgium. You're as good as your last result, and they take that part quite literally there, and you're only good when you win or when you help a teammate win. So that's always just a funny narrative to see and how that develops. But I agree with you, it was nice to see. It was poetic that he won the Strade Bianche stage, especially by being pushed to the limit by Del Toro. Yes, he sat in the wheel quite a while. Don't blame him a single bit for that. It only made sense to do that. He had no incentive to ride. He had no incentive to help Del Toro gain time on Simon Yates, his GC leader. He had no incentive to help Del Toro, who nearly dropped him before. So it all made sense. And then he had that sprint to Pieterse, which he just about lost, which was a quite nasty uphill, really fantastic sprint to see there as well. A finish that is perfect. You don't get it that often, right? Where it's a real sprint for the power sprinters. It's really hard to find them as well, because if it's just too hard or too long, then the GC riders will take over, and I don't know what Pogačar could have done there. I'm happy he wasn't in there to ruin the party. But on the other hand, if it's not enough, then you're just going to get a sprint where the fast guys are going to be led out. And we saw that last year. The Tour had one of those stages where I think Geermite took the win eventually, just ahead of Philipsen, which didn't have quite the same dynamic. So it's hard to find, and that makes those finishes really intriguing. I know the Tour has kind of stepped away from trying to find them, because for a while they had a rider called Peter Sagan showing up, and he would just always win those stages. But the 2012 Tour, I think that was the second or the third Tour I watched, that had a number of those stages where we had an intriguing battle between Cancellara and Sagan. So to that extent, I enjoyed seeing that type of stage design, and seeing Van Aert sprint there against Pieterse for such a long, powerful explosion was really great to see, and fully agree with you about the turning the negativity around. So let's see what it brings. Do you have any predictions for the Tour? How many stage wins?
I think that is going to be a bit too hard for me to predict. I think I should almost say that I should just stop after being somewhat right about his Giro, but it's gonna be tough, because I think that he also is going to be having an important role for Vingegaard, and I don't know what Pogačar will do as well. So it's going to be difficult, but I definitely see it wouldn't be. I think that he will be close with a couple of stages. But it's hard to say if he's going to win one, because the competition is just going to be very tough. So it's just going to be very hard to see what how his race will plan out, and you just know that he's not going to have the freedom that he had in the Giro somewhat. That's just not going to be the case. So it's going to be hard to see Van Aert win a stage, but I think that he will definitely be close in certain stages for sure.
I think we'll see probably one stage win. I'm curious to see that first week and how everything pans out. I'm honestly quite excited, and we're going to be making some content until our summer break, so I think we've covered it. I don't really see much time or sense in talking about Pidcock because it wasn't really clear what he was doing this Giro. It wasn't really clear what his goals were. It wasn't really clear what... Nothing was really clear, and everything just goes against each other. Did he try for GC? Did he want to go for stages? What was his goal? At some point it's been suggested that he only got notified he was doing the Giro so late he didn't properly train and just wanted to see how well he was climbing as a test, similar to Van der Poel and Nove Mesto, for potentially a Vuelta GC rate. And it was said no Vuelta at all. I really don't know, so I don't really see much sense in talking about that, and we should probably just forget about this Pidcock Giro as soon as possible.
That's a fair point. He needs to get a little bit better, I think, in making decisions. I mean, it's almost the opposite of Van der Poel on the road. At least it's just, I don't know. At times it feels like, I wouldn't say wasted potential because he still delivers at times, but it's just he needs to make decisions, I think, and he needs to make decisions quick in terms of what he wants to do with his talent and ability on the road, and hopefully that will be made somewhere in the future, but as you said, this Giro is definitely something to forget.
Good, then I think we've covered it. Heavy focus on mountain bike, and we'll probably be back in the near future covering some more cyclocross topics following the mountain biking and road racing seasons quite well. Thank you so much, Issam.
Yeah, no worries, it was a pleasure.
And we will be back soon, as said. Thanks everyone for listening. Promise we won't keep you waiting this long again. See you guys soon. Goodbye.